Today I want to share with you the story of an amazing scientific dispute. That's how it all started. Once upon a time, more than 200 years ago, there was a man who simply could not stand disputes. He preferred to avoid conflicts and maintain harmony in communication. He once wrote books in which he neatly outlined his scientific theory. He did it so carefully to avoid any disputes or disagreements. At first glance, his work was accepted without much emotion, and no one criticized its author. However, soon there were supporters of his theory, people with a great interest in science. They began to actively spread the ideas from the book, causing lively debate in the scientific community. Sounds not impressive, and if I tell you that it is this theory that underlies the understanding of such modern sciences as medicine, genetics, psychology, and biology in general. Today, we are going to talk about the theory of evolution proposed by Charles Darwin. This theory is probably one of the most significant in the history of science. It affected not only biology, but also many other fields of knowledge. Darwin suggested that all species of living organisms evolved from a common ancestor over millions of years through natural selection. This means that those individuals who are better adapted to the environment have a better chance of surviving and passing on their genes to their offspring. As environmental conditions change, species change to adapt to new survival conditions. This theory has changed our understanding of the world and has become the basis for many scientific studies. Charles Darwin was the first scientist who put forward the theory of the evolutionary development of all living beings on the planet. At a time when it was accepted that the origin of life on Earth was God's providence, Darwin was able to prove that this was the result of evolution from common ancestors. His theory of natural selection became the basis for understanding the process of evolution. In addition, he proposed a theory about sexual selection and the law of heredity, which were met with doubts at the time. The basic mechanism of evolution, discovered by Darwin, was recognized and accepted by the scientific community only in the middle of the 20th century, becoming the foundation for modern biological theory. Charles Darwin was born on February 12, 1809 in Shrewsbury, United Kingdom. His family was educated and intellectual. Charles' grandfather, Erasmus Darwin, was a renowned scientist, physician, and poet who also showed an interest in the ideas of evolution. Charles' father, Robert Darwin, was a renowned physician and financier. His relationship with his father was warm, and Charles appreciated his intelligence. Charles' school years were not particularly exciting for him in terms of education. He was often bored in class and showed no interest in the subjects taught at school. Instead, he preferred to do his own reading and chemical experiments. His passion for science was noticeable from an early age. After graduating from elementary school, Charles was enrolled in a secondary school where he was taught Latin, Greek, and some other subjects. However, he did not find any interest in studying here either. His attitude towards school was skeptical, and he even got the nickname Gaz because of his chemical experiments. Despite this, Charles showed an interest in observing nature and collecting beetles. His fascination with nature and the animal world was the first step towards his future scientific discoveries. Charles Darwin's voyage on the Beagle became one of the most famous and influential in the history of science. In 1831, Darwin was invited by Captain Robert Fitzroy on an expedition. During this journey, Darwin made many observations and collected an extensive collection of plant, animal, and geological specimens. He explored various islands and coasts of South America, including the Galapagos Islands, where he collected a lot of data and noticed the diversity of species, which served as a key moment in the formation of his theory of natural selection. Darwin's journey on the Beagle gave him a unique opportunity to study the diversity of living organisms and their adaptation to various environmental conditions. These observations and studies served as the basis for his subsequent work and the formulation of the theory of evolution. In the Galapagos Islands, an important part of his voyage on the ship Beagle, Charles Darwin discovered an amazing variety of species adapted to different habitat conditions on each of the islands. His observations of various species of Darwinian kraken, turtles, and other animals made a significant contribution to his understanding of the processes of natural selection and evolution. Especially important was the observation of the beak shapes of Darwinian birds. The aforementioned kraken, he noticed that the beaks of birds vary depending on their lifestyle and type of food. This led to the idea that birds with different beaks descend from a common ancestor, but each species has adapted to certain food conditions on different islands. These observations and conclusions became key to the formation of his theory of natural selection. Darwin realized that variability within species, combined with natural selection, allows living organisms to adapt to and survive in their environment. Thus, his observations on the Galapagos Islands became an important part of the evidence in favor of his theory of evolution. During this journey, Darwin collected extensive material, including the species diversity of animals and plants, geological deposits, and geographical features of various regions. These observations were investigated and analyzed for many years after Darwin returned from his journey. The main point of Darwin's theory is that species of living organisms evolve and change over time as a result of natural selection, adaptation, and hereditary changes. Darwin suggested that all species descend from a common ancestor and evolve through mechanisms of variability and heredity. Natural selection is a key mechanism that determines which traits will be passed on to the next generations, since organisms that are best adapted to their environment have a better chance of survival and reproduction. Thus, Darwin's theory explains the diversity of life on Earth and the origin of different species through the process of natural selection and evolution. When Charles Darwin first presented his work The Origin of Species in 1859, it caused considerable discussion and debate, but the resonance was not immediately overwhelming. Although some scientists and intellectuals recognized the importance and significance of his ideas, many rejected his theory, and this caused discontent and criticism from the church and society. However, over time, Darwin's theory became more widely accepted as new scientific discoveries and evidence began to confirm his ideas. Darwin really showed sincere faith in God in his youth, and his theory of evolution did not exclude the possibility of a creative act of God. However, religious communities, especially in his time, often perceived the theory of Darwinism as a threat to their teachings about the divine origin of man and life. Darwin may have clarified his views in order to mitigate possible dissatisfaction with religious communities and prevent conflicts. He could have taken this approach in order to avoid tension and disputes with the extremely religious people of his time, realizing that his theory could cause sharp criticism and opposition. Thus, although Darwin continued to believe in God and adhered to the idea that God created life, his refinements could be strategic in order to reduce potential resistance from religious circles and maintain public acceptance of his scientific research. Indeed, despite Darwin's efforts to soften his views and avoid conflicts with the church, his theory of evolution still provoked a sharp reaction from religious circles. Church leaders and adherents of religious teachings perceived Darwinism as a direct contradiction to the biblical doctrine of creation and the origin of life. Their aggressive reaction was due to the fact that the theory of evolution undermined the foundations of their faith and the authority of the church. They saw Darwinism not only as a threat to their dogmatic beliefs, but also to a social order based on religious principles. Thus, even Darwin's soft concessions and attempts to smooth out differences with the church did not protect him from aggression from church leaders, whose reaction was related to protecting their authority and preserving the influence of the church in society. Yes, research and discussions on various aspects of evolution continue in the scientific community. This leads to the emergence of alternative hypotheses and criticism of certain aspects of Darwinism. Despite the fact that Charles Darwin's theory of evolution remains the main cornerstone in biology and the generally accepted model for explaining the origin of species, new data, discoveries, and revisions allow us to refine and expand our understanding of evolutionary processes. Of course, criticism of Darwinism can be useful for science, as it encourages scientists to analyze data more thoroughly and formulate accurate models. These discussions help to improve our understanding of the processes of evolution and their impact on living organisms, contributing to the development of scientific knowledge. Darwin's theory of evolution and natural selection remains fundamental in science to this day. It continues to serve as a basis for further research that deepens our understanding of the processes of evolution and expands our knowledge of the biological world.